The Republic of India maintains the world's second-largest military, an immense organization consisting of nearly 1.5 million active-duty personnel. This chart shows how the massive force is structured, dividing personnel into three primary branches: the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. To manage this size, it operates across distinct regional commands, supported by training hubs distributed throughout the subcontinent. This is a force with decades of continuous operational experience. Since independence in 1947, these units have been heavily deployed to defend borders and fight major territorial wars. Yet, despite possessing this overwhelming size, firepower, and structural readiness, the Indian military operated under a strict, self-imposed psychological barrier for over half a century. That barrier was a political doctrine known as strategic restraint. When dealing with provocations or proxy threats, the Indian government historically chose de-escalation over kinetic retaliation. When India did fight conventional wars, they adhered strictly to traditional military rules of engagement. This approach resulted in formal, decisive victories, captured clearly in the signing of this surrender document in 1971. Adversaries recognized they could not win a head-on conventional war against a 1.5 million-strong military, so they found a loophole. They utilized proxy terrorism to inflict damage locally, knowing it wouldn't trigger a full-scale military invasion. An unwritten rule developed. India would respond to these terror attacks with soft diplomatic pressure, keeping its armed forces stationed firmly on its own side of the line of control, or LOC, the heavily militarized border dividing the Kashmir region. Because the political response was entirely predictable, the world's second-largest military machine was effectively paralyzed against cross-border terrorism. The absolute breaking point for this long-held doctrine arrived on February 14, 2019, in the Pulwama district of Jammu. An SUV packed with explosives rammed into a security convoy. The blast killed 40 personnel from the CRPF, turning the highway into massive devastation. A Pakistan-based terrorist organization, Jaish-e-Mohammed, immediately claimed responsibility for the suicide bombing. In the days following the attack, the Indian political and military leadership reached a consensus. Relying on the old diplomatic rulebook had failed to protect their personnel. They needed to hit back physically. For the first time in decades, the political leadership authorized the military to completely drop the doctrine of strategic restraint and carry out a cross-border strike. The Indian Air Force, or IAF, began mobilizing for a highly classified retaliatory mission given the codename Operation Bandar. To execute the strike, the military selected a dozen IAF Mirage 2000 fighter jets. This map illustrates the flight path. On February 26th, jets took off from Indian air bases, flying over the line of control into Pakistani airspace. They traveled deep into Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, dropping precision-guided missiles onto terror training camps in Balakot. The following morning, the Pakistan Air Force attempted a retaliatory airstrike on Indian soil. The IAF launched its own fighters in response, triggering a rare, high-stakes dogfight between the two nuclear-armed nations. In the middle of this skirmish, an older generation Indian MiG-21 Bison engaged a Pakistani F-16, scoring a direct hit and shooting it down. The Indian MiG was also shot down, and pilot Abhinandan Varthaman was captured by Pakistani forces. Following global deliberation, he was released 2 days later. Across those 12 days, the Indian military permanently shattered the adversary's illusion that the line of control would function as a protective shield for terrorist infrastructure. The Balakot airstrike sent a clear signal far beyond the subcontinent. India proved to the world it would no longer limit itself to diplomatic protests following domestic tragedies. The operation placed India alongside the United States of Israel as one of the few global powers willing and able to execute preemptive military strikes deep into enemy territory to avenge its personnel. The message to adversaries was exact. Funding and organizing proxy terrorism would now carry an immediate physical cost. The element of violent unpredictability had been officially integrated into India's strategic deterrent. To sustain this aggressive footing over the long term, the military must continually adapt its operational structure. On land, the Indian Army is actively reorganizing to allow for much faster ground mobilization, ensuring they can execute highly flexible, limited military operations on short notice. Concurrently, the military is aggressively positioning massive naval assets in the Arabian Sea, applying sustained pressure across multiple domains during a conflict. They are also prioritizing the modernization of elite units like the NSG, the National Security Guard. Fully equipping these commandos with advanced training and weapons is an essential requirement for staying 2 steps ahead of global terror networks. The bombs dropped on Balakot achieved their tactical targets, but more significantly, they established a proactive, uncompromising defense posture that continues to dictate the rules of engagement in the region today.